Welcome to Podkey Daily News, your fast brief on power, policy, markets, and global fallout. The biggest shift today is quiet but far-reaching. Courts just gave the executive branch much more room on immigration, while separate crises abroad are testing U.S. military posture, aid capacity, and market nerves. The Supreme Court handed the administration a major immigration win on two fronts, and the practical effect is more executive discretion with less court interference. First, the court ruled 6-3 that temporary protected status termination decisions are non-justiciable, which means judges largely cannot second-guess a president's move to end TPS. That directly puts roughly 300,000 Haitians and about 6,000 to 7,000 Syrians at risk, and it opens the door for future action against more than 100,000 Salvadoran and Ukrainian TPS holders as well. Why it matters is simple. TPS recipients often have deep roots, long work histories, and families here, so revoking status is not a paperwork event. It can trigger mass removal proceedings, labor disruption, and local economic stress. The labor angle is especially important in healthcare and elder care, where many Haitian TPS holders work. Pulling large numbers of people out of that workforce would hit staffing in places already short on workers. At the same time, the court upheld the metering approach at ports of entry, meaning migrants waiting in Mexico generally cannot claim asylum until they physically cross into the United States. That narrows asylum access and gives border authorities firmer legal cover to turn people back on the Mexican side. The immediate change may be limited, where crossings were already heavily restricted, but the legal tool is stronger now. Put together with DHS's lower visibility enforcement strategy, the picture is clearer. Broader deportation capacity, reduced judicial review, and less public-facing drama while policy gets tougher underneath. The thing to watch is execution. Large-scale removals still run into hard limits like detention space, aircraft, travel documents, and whether origin countries will take people back. In the Gulf, reporting points to a serious Iranian missile and drone attack that penetrated defenses and hit a U.S. naval base in Bahrain. The reported damage includes satellite communications terminals and multiple buildings, with injuries and casualties across the region. The Pentagon has not given a public repair estimate. Wall Street Journal analysts, using defense cost models, put construction damage to Bahrain buildings at roughly $400 million, which gives at least a rough scale of the hit. Why this matters is that it reinforces how much the regional threat picture has changed. U.S. bases designed before Iran's current missile and drone capacity are being reassessed, including whether key command nodes need to be buried or otherwise hardened. U.S. forces have already carried out retaliatory strikes on Iranian missile and drone storage and radar sites, so this is now both a repair problem and a posture problem. One more point here. Independent verification is harder than usual because of restrictions on commercial imagery, so journalists have leaned heavily on open-source satellite images, videos, and photos to map the damage. Venezuela is dealing with a fast-moving humanitarian disaster after two powerful earthquakes on June 26. Casualty figures are still contested and changing. Some reporting cites nearly 600 confirmed dead. Other accounts put the official toll closer to 1,000, and the UN says more than 50,000 people are unaccounted for. What is not disputed is the scale of strain. Hospitals are overwhelmed, many people are sleeping outside, operating capacity is limited, and damaged infrastructure, including the main airport, is slowing the response. International rescue teams from countries including Mexico, Switzerland, and El Salvador have arrived with dogs, drones, and equipment, filling gaps where local responders lack heavy machinery. The United States has sent military-style humanitarian coordination, including a major general to help organize the response and vessels carrying medical supplies. The next issue is access. Aid depends on diplomatic arrangements with Maduro's government, and reconstruction will require far more outside support because this disaster landed on top of an already collapsed economy and weak public health system. On AI, the policy signal is getting sharper. OpenAI rolled out GPT 5.6 only to a small administration-approved customer group, while the White House blocked foreign access to Anthropic's newest models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5. That tells you advanced AI access is being treated more explicitly as a national security matter, not just a commercial product decision. Industry leaders are warning that if export-style controls become routine, it could disrupt global research, product rollouts, and customer access across the sector. At the same time, investors are getting nervous that AI demand for memory chips may be overshooting reality. South Korea's Kospi dropped sharply, at one point around 8%, as bubble fears picked up. This is already showing up in the real economy through higher component costs and tighter supply, pushing up prices for devices like iPads, MacBooks, and Xbox consoles. So the watch item is whether AI stays a clean growth story or starts to look more like a security-constrained, supply-tight market with bubble risk layered on top. In U.S. housing, the lock-in problem is still doing most of the damage. Owners sitting on sub-4% mortgages from 2020 and 2021 do not want to sell and take on today's financing costs, so listings stay tight. Inventory has improved from around 2 months in 2021 to roughly 4.5 months now, which sounds healthier, but the market is still constrained in practical terms because the cheapest existing homes are not turning over. Lawmakers are trying one tax-based fix through the More Homes on the Market Act, which would raise capital gains exclusions to $500,000 for single filers and $1 million for joint filers in hopes of nudging more owners to sell. There is also a labor cost issue. Construction firms rely heavily on immigrant labor, including undocumented workers, so stricter enforcement can tighten labor supply and raise building costs, making new housing even harder to deliver affordably. And in New York City, the Rent Guidelines Board approved a rent freeze for about 1 million rent-regulated apartments, despite landlord objections over insurance, utilities, and property taxes. That freeze will likely face legal challenges over whether the board adequately weighed landlord cost pressures, so this is relief for tenants now, but not settled policy yet. On trade, President Trump threatened a 100% tariff on imports from any country that imposes a digital services tax, which raises the risk of a wider fight with countries like France. He also proposed another $11 billion in farm assistance on top of $12 billion already approved, trying to cushion tariff fallout in rural America, though many farmers still say they want stronger prices, not bigger checks. In Europe, Volkswagen announced a more radical restructuring that could mean thousands more job cuts beyond the 50,000 already negotiated. That move reflects a three-way squeeze: U.S. tariffs, rapid share losses in China to BYD and other competitors, and stronger competition from Tesla in Europe. The broader takeaway is that industrial policy, trade barriers, and market disruption are all feeding into each other at once. A few quick ones to keep on the radar. Senators are pushing for a CFTC probe into Polymarket over paid influencer videos that allegedly showed trades that never happened and hid sponsorships. John Bolton pleaded guilty to mishandling classified information tied to his memoir, avoiding a trial that both sides said could expose more sensitive material. In Ukraine, former counterintelligence chief Dmitry Kozura received a life sentence for passing top-secret military information to Russia, underscoring how intense the internal espionage war remains. And in Europe, extreme heat is now forcing public health interventions severe enough that Paris temporarily banned public alcohol consumption and takeaway alcohol sales to reduce dehydration-related emergencies. That's the brief for now from Podkey Daily News. The themes to watch are concentrated executive power, harder borders, and the way security shocks are spilling into markets, labor, and daily life. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.